Well, don't use the R word, even if the president is. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, there's a lot of talk these days in the mainstream media about whether or not the United States is slipping into a recession. Just this morning, believe it or not, on Fox News, I saw former President Obama's economic advisor, Austin Goolsbee, saying that we're not yet in a recession, but that could happen. And oddly enough, when the reporter directly asked him who gets the credit for the uninterrupted months of economic growth that we've seen, Austin Goolsbee actually said it's been 115 months or something like that. 2/3 of those were during the Obama administration. 1/3 of those have been during the Trump administration. So good on both presidents is actually what he said. He actually applauded President Trump for his successful economic policy. But Bill, there's no doubt that there's a talk from the White House about the possibility of a payroll tax deduction. The president himself, even though he's making protestations that the media shouldn't be using the term recession, continually uses the word recession while he's saying that. Bill, does the president need some messaging help in this, or are we on the precipice of something that could be a long slide into the malaise of the Carter or Obama years?
I don't know. I mean, technically speaking, a recession is a decline. It's a negative number, isn't it? I mean, it's like...
There's a technical rating of that economists use, but for my money, it's actually what the American people think about it that matters the most.
Well, in that case, then you could probably say this is a forced recession. It's needless to say it's in the interest of every Democrat in the country, and Bill Maher will come out and say this verbatim. He's praying for a recession because it'll help defeat Trump, and if that means millions or tens of millions of people have to suffer, small price to pay for Bill Maher and his cocktail party crowd. Multimillionaires, a little recession doesn't seem to sting them at all. If your definition of a recession is what the public thinks is a recession, then I don't think there's much question that the mainstream media is doing everything they can to create a recession. The question is, what is the economy actually doing? That's what impacts people on the ground in the real world. If we're talking about negative economic growth, in other words, a shrinkage of the economy, if that's a definition of a recession, I'd have to see the numbers. But I suspect what's happening. Again, I don't have the data, but if I had to guess, I would say that what's happening is the economic growth of the Trump administration is now slowing to the levels of the Obama administration, and that sure looks like a recession.
Well, Bill, even the Trump administration is clearly concerned about this. So whether or not they admit to the fact that they have these concerns, just the fact that inside the White House, President Trump and others are discussing the possibility of a payroll tax cut, similar to what happened, by the way, in the short term during the Obama administration. They dropped that by 2 points. It seems to me that the White House is clearly concerned about it. And you might wonder, Bill, why the president doesn't look to a different tool. For example, perhaps rolling back the punitive tariffs against China, which may be putting a damper not only on U.S. agriculture production, but other things in the economy because everything's getting more expensive coming in from China.
I would roll back the tariffs on China when China begins to show not just that it's behaving itself, but a relatively consistent, trend of behaving itself. When I mean behaving itself, I don't mean doing what the U.S. tells it to do. I just mean abiding by internationally accepted trade laws and respecting copyrights and all the rest of the stuff that the Chinese don't do. So I wouldn't go there if I was looking to restart the economy. I would.
Bill, it just sounds like you and President Trump are holding the American public and consumers hostage so that you can work out this spat you're having over licensing and various other kinds of arcane economic concepts.
What we're trying to do is establish a trade relationship with China that's based on equality of treatment under a common law, rather than simply bending over the railing and hoping we get a kiss. It's not at all like that. It's been decades now of the kind of economic one-sidedness that makes us into just chumps. And to the degree that we're going to stop doing that, it's not just good for American people, it's good for China, it's good for the Chinese system, because as long as this whole thing has been so one-sided, China continues to issue all of these bad debts, and their economy is nothing like as sound as people make it want to be. So I'm not saying sacrifice the American people on the altar of getting China into line. I'm saying getting China into line is in the long-term interest of the American people.
Well, the American people don't seem to see their own long-term interests, Bill, because if the American people were really concerned about what China is doing, perhaps they'd dial back their purchasing of Chinese goods, which they clearly have not.
But that's to expect people to behave contrary to their own best interest. And the beautiful thing about belonging to a philosophy that's based in reality is you cannot appeal to that unattainable motivation. You just can't. People are going to buy the least expensive, best quality products they can find, and they're not going to. Evidence shows that they're not going to be swayed about it. They may find some comfort in buying American if the prices are close or if the products are even or something. But that's pretty marginal. So it's in the interest of the American people, especially the poor people of America, to have inexpensive goods brought from China. The cheaper a blow dryer is, the more accessible it is to everybody. So that's definitely in our interest. What's not in our interest is the currency manipulation and the constant theft of intellectual property, and to that degree they need to be punished until they stop doing it.
So do you think conservatives in America, especially people who are lower income conservatives, are sitting back and saying, well, we believe in free markets and everything and that the federal government shouldn't choose winners and losers, but this Chinese stuff is cheap, so we're going to keep buying it in hopes that President Trump at some point cracks down on it?
No, that's not it at all. It's using the simple mechanisms of personal self-interest. A tariff on a country that needs to be disciplined into behaving like an actual country would, like the rest of the countries that we trade with all around the world. The idea of a tariff is to put a charge on those products so that the products then become high enough that people don't buy them. You've got it exactly backwards. It's not that people are buying the Chinese products. It's like, no, the idea is to make the price of the Chinese products relatively higher than they are now so that China doesn't get the trade. And when China doesn't get the trade, they suffer. And when they suffer, they start to play by the rules.
Well, you're looking at one side of the balance sheet there, Bill, but you're not looking at the possibility that the American public may just say, well, I'll tell you what, prices are too high right now. I'm just not going to buy anything right now.
Well, look, that's the essence of what a recession is. So I didn't finish my argument here. I just said that I don't think I would relax the tariffs on China, because I think to do so would be to make the situation worse. It would be to tell the Chinese, yeah, if you really, 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 really screw us over for a long time, then we'll have a temper tantrum for 8 or 9 months. But after that, you'll be able to go back to doing whatever you want to. That just encourages them to do more. So I wouldn't relax that at all. But what I would do is I would cut other taxes, because when he cut them the first time, it made the economy just boom. The left can say whatever they want to about the Laffer curve. The only thing they can't say is that it doesn't work, because it does. It obviously works. Every time there's been a tax cut of significant size, the U.S. economy has grown mightily. And if you want to start getting incentives to eliminate a recession, the best way to do it is to put more money in the hands of people. And the more money in the hands of people doesn't mean more money in the hands of the Chinese oligarchs. It means more money in the hands of the American people. And that means you have to give them the only place where you as a government can adjust the balance sheet. And that is, we're going to take less money from you by force. We're going to take less money from you by force and leave you more money to buy the things that you want to buy. And needless to say, that stimulates the economy in a way that government stimulus doesn't, because the government is taking money out of your pocket, keeping 2/3 of it, and then dribbling it around on these vanity projects that like the bridge to nowhere and other things that people don't care about. You want to grow the economy, if you want to avoid a recession, cut taxes. Pretty simple, really. And I suspect that's probably where he's going to end up going.
Well, President Trump has already used that tax cut tool once, and some on the left, especially those who take an interest in the economy, have argued that the reason why he has to keep these Chinese tariffs in place is because he needs the income to the Treasury, because it was diminished because of the tax cuts. Now, in the long term, the Laffer curve would argue that will more than compensate, because the economy will rebound. But in the short term, that can be painful. We've seen some numbers, and I'm not going to get into the the details on this, but there has been an inversion of bond yields that would seem to indicate a lack of hope on the part of investors in this short term, or rather in the long term. And so they're kind of trying to make hay in the short term while they can, because people know when this bond curve inversion happens, within 14 to 22 months, you wind up in a recession. Bill, I guess you have often said that, yeah, there is a button to cause the economy to rebound, and President Trump pressed that button. But is there another button?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, the way you describe it is that it was an option that he used. Like there was a certain tax cut that was allowable. He pushed the button. He got the benefits of that, and now that option's off the table. I don't know about you, but after Donald Trump's tax cut, I find that I'm still being taxed. And so when you find out how many places you are taxed and the number of taxes in America, I say that is the place to go. I mean, I don't think there's any question about it. I'm having a hard time deciding whether I would rather have my money go to Chinese oligarchs or the U.S. government. This was not a tough decision for me formally. It really wasn't. I was on the side of American government all the way. But American government now is so rife with social justice warrior attitudes and all of these other things that are bad for prosperity that I'm beginning to wonder if that's the smartest investment at all. But I can tell you one thing I am 100% sure of. If there's a dollar floating around out there, and the choice is that dollar goes to Chinese oligarchs or the federal government or the people that earned it, I'm going with C.
So let's make this the final question, Bill. As we know in economics, a lot of what happens is really psychological. When people start to believe that things are recovering, then they tend to spend more money. When they start to believe that trouble may be around the bend, they withhold that money. Bill, what can conservatives do right now, not just to support President Trump and his efforts to brag about how great everything is, but also to simply steel themselves against the possibility of a downfall while continuing to act in a way that prevents that downfall?
Well, you're absolutely right about recessions and booms and so on being mostly a result of confidence. And that's why we had 8 years of Obama never getting much above 1% economic growth, because everybody knew that there was no sense in trying to plan forget 5 years from now, try to plan for next year. You never knew when he was going to use the pen and the phone and just sort of dictate in a new kind of a law, a tax, healthcare laws or whatever. It was unpredictable and everybody knew it. Donald Trump comes into office. He's perceived as a businessman. He cuts taxes and the economy just explodes. So it is, in fact, as you say, it is a psychological event. And it seems to me that the press is doing everything they can to convince the American people that if we're not in a recession now, one is definitely coming. So you better save your money and not spend it. And therefore you create the situation that you want to create. That's how you manufacture a recession. And when you hear people like Bill Maher say, I think it'd be great for the country to have a very, very, very severe economic recession so that Donald Trump could be put out of office, then that's all you need to know about these people and how much they care about the actual American people. I say that given the taxation rates in this country still to this day, when lowering taxes is no longer an option, when there are literally no more taxes that can be cut, Scott, we won't be having a discussion about recessions or any of that. We'll be taking our nuclear-powered Cadillacs to vacation on the moon when taxes are low enough so that they can't be cut anymore. This whole thing is just a giant swamp. It's not a swamp. It's a vortex. It's a black hole. It sucks up money and sends it to the government where it simply disappears. Or in the best case scenario, you get an exceedingly meager return on your investment, as I can testify here in Los Angeles, paying city taxes on top of everything else. We now have enough trash in downtown Los Angeles to be a viable contender for maybe the largest outbreak of bubonic plague in recent history. This is what my tax dollars in the city of Los Angeles buy me, and my tax dollars for the state of California buy me. They buy me bubonic plague. So if I'm going to be taxed to the level where money's going to be taken from me to provide social services so disgusting, disgraceful, and pathetic that bubonic plague is an actual threat on the streets of Los Angeles in 2019, then that's telling me that too much money is coming out of my pocket and everybody else's pocket. And if that money were put back in people's pockets, they would spend it on the things that they want to spend it on. And if they spent it on the things they wanted to spend it on, then businesses around this country would prosper. And this giant circle of prosperity goes up instead of down. People have more money, they spend more money, they work for companies, everybody's spending more money, they're making more money. Great. But that's not what they're trying to do here. That's what the media is trying specifically to avoid. And the only thing that I see Donald Trump having the power to do is to simply demand higher tax cuts. And if the left is saying this is why we need the tariffs, if they're saying that we're going to have the Chinese make up the shortfall in the U.S. budget deficit rather than sticking it to the American people again, you could just cry me a river over that one.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the members at BillWhittle.com are the kind of people who can be disgusted by the bubonic plague in Los Angeles and never lose sight of that nuclear-powered Cadillac. We are grateful for their support of this enterprise. If you'd like to join them, you can go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.